Thank you. As noted, I'm Bob McElwain, Managing Director, Chase Indiana Middle Market. My role includes covering the commercial bank and middle market banking for Chase here in Indiana. So welcome to all of you. I know a lot of you in the audience. Look forward to meeting with some of you that I haven't met perhaps after the event. But most importantly, thanks for coming on a weather day like today. I guess it could be worse. We could have snow, so we can manage the process here with the temperatures. But great turnout, so we're really thankful that you could join us today. On behalf of our Indiana Chairman, Al Smith, Al, I see you out there if you could wave, and our Midwest Chairman, Melissa Bean, and the rest of our Chase team is Melissa. I saw her this morning as well. If she could wave, that would be great. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone to Indianapolis, the Indianapolis Forum of the Global Cities Initiative. This is a joint project of the Brookings Institution and JPMorgan Chase. I'd like to thank Mayor Greg Ballard, who will be up here in a few moments after me to give us a few remarks, the Indy Chamber, IUPUI, Butler University for their leadership, as well as the many other city, county, and statewide elected officials who have come together today to join us to hear a lot of what we have to offer in terms of the plans for Global City. Let me just say, the Global Cities Initiative is here. This is a culmination of a lot of work on a lot of people's part. It's a 5-year project that we launched in 2012 to help our communities think about local economic development in a different way, in a more global context, which is very important. It's things that we've been doing and talking about at JPMorgan for a long, long time. You know, at JPMorgan Chase, we help people and organizations with their financial needs every single day, and this is one of the things that we do well. Our bankers talk about this with our clients. You know, the fact that the global reach is not something that's not something you can't do. It is something that's certainly attainable, and again, we'll be covering a lot of that today. Why do we think this is important? The world's economic map is shifting, and we believe that Indianapolis is well positioned to succeed in this global economy. We're well positioned because we have such strong clusters of economic activity in a couple of key areas, really: information technology, advanced manufacturing, life sciences, logistics, and certainly motorsports, which is very important to this city, as we all know. Thanks to the vision of the Indy Chamber, IUPUI, and Butler, and the many leaders across the market, we now have a thoughtful international trade plan for Central Indiana, which will be rolled out and disclosed to you this morning. This morning, we will hear our speakers discuss the need to expand our economic growth and job creation through global trade, which is absolutely critically important to the vibrancy of this economy here in Central Indiana. We need to align that exciting venture with making sure our local people have the skills and experience that will be necessary for many of those new jobs that will be created. One of the things that we do as a firm through JPMorgan Foundation, we invest in multiple programs that support workforce readiness. That's one of the pillars that we support and spend a lot of time each and every day looking at how we can be thoughtful and help in those areas as well. We need to continue to invest in a highly educated workforce, strong infrastructure, and business support systems that will be needed to help us compete in the rest of the world. I appreciate that so many of you are interested in coming together. Again, this is an unbelievable crowd, an unbelievable draw today, with the goal as to get together as a community, talk about our region's global economic competitiveness, and really take what we learned today and apply it into the marketplace. I wouldn't, I've got to say at least one thing today. We've got 2 unbelievably important events today. This is number 1 on the agenda, but don't forget there's an event tonight at 7 o'clock as well. As a longtime Indiana grad and a big fan of basketball, we don't want to forget that we've got another event tonight too. So I had to say that. And with that, I am now pleased to introduce the Honorable Greg Ballard, Mayor of Indianapolis. Mayor, please join us for a few opening remarks.
Thank you. Thank everybody for coming. This is a terrific crowd this morning. We had a great dinner last night, and I want to thank everybody for participating and understanding just how important this is. And as it really is nice to have so many great minds here together in one pleasant understanding where Indianapolis and Central Indiana needs to go in this regard. As most of you probably know, I've been pushing the global agenda, the international agenda, pretty hard ever since I've been the mayor. And now, and we've done some things that we can do from the city level But, you know, the business, the charitable, the cultural, and all of it coming together is going to be very special. But specifically, having a plan, a strategy, an export strategy is going to make a huge difference. And so I want to thank everybody, particularly Chase and Brookings and IUPUI and Butler and the Chamber and so many others for making sure that all of this comes together. Because they've done a lot of work already, but as Bob said, this is a 5-year plan. This is not something that we're going to meet about today and then there you go. This is something that where people are coming together and understanding that to compete in the global economy, you must understand that there is one, for one, and that we need to engage. We need to be a part of it. No offense to the state or any of the states in the country, I still believe that cities are the economic engines in the country. They are the entity that can be nimble and that really create the economic impact. And when you have a region like we have that is very vibrant and is still growing at a really great scale, it is important for us to make sure that those who follow us are resting on a good plan and an economy that will continue to thrive. We've done really well in the last 30 to 40 years, not much question about that. You know, when you look at our peer cities across the Midwest and where we were, and there's so many of you people in here know the names. For those of you who are visiting today, I'll give you a couple of the names. Indy and No Place and Naptown, all right? Nobody calls us those things anymore. Nobody says that anymore about us. But now we need to take it to a different place. And I've been saying for years now that our competitors are not necessarily Kansas City and Columbus and Memphis. It's Stockholm. It's Auckland. It's Paris. We need to understand that if we are going to thrive as a region, that the name of Indianapolis and Central Indiana has to be known throughout the world as a place to do business, as a place to live, work, and play. Not just amongst ourselves, but around the world. And so much of what we have been trying to do is going in that direction. And so now we have some partners that have come in and put a lot of meat on these bones to make sure that we do this into the future. So I'm so pleased with this turnout today. I very much appreciate it. I'm going to learn a lot today. We were talking at dinner last night. Michael said, I told him to be very critical. Is that right? Is that the word you said? Be very critical. So don't get offended. But because we want to know what we need to do with partners. But nothing, as Indianapolis knows more than most cities, without partners, you never move forward. You don't do anything individually. You don't do anything singly. You have to have the right partners to move forward. And we have got great partners in this group right here with Brookings and Chase and so many others. So I want to thank everybody for coming out today. Now it's my honor to introduce Amy, who I sat next to last night, Amy Liu of the Brookings Institution and the co-director of the Global Cities Initiative, who's going to talk to us a little bit. Amy, please.
Good morning. Good morning. And thank you, Mayor Ballard. You know, I was at dinner last night. I was quickly reminded that this city has produced some of the most distinguished mayors in U.S. history. You know, from Dick Lugar to Bill Hudnut to Stephen Goldsmith. And after talking to Mayor Ballard last night, it was really clear that you naturally join that list of distinguished mayors. So I'm really excited to be here today with our good partner, JPMorgan Chase, to help this region launch its first ever Metropolitan Export Initiative. And we're going to hear more about that from Michael Huber in a few minutes. You know, when Brookings first launched its pilots with several regions to create these export plans, it grew out of a growing national and local concern that we needed to create more jobs at a time when there was weak consumer demand here at home. There's no doubt times have changed. The economy has improved. But I have to say the imperative to focus on exports and trade has not diminished. And for one, while the U.S. economy has officially recovered from the Great Recession, people have not bounced back. There are still too many Americans who are without jobs and too many who have seen no real improvements in their wages or their incomes. And you can see that economic fortune play out across the country. Among these 4 metropolitan areas, this region has seen some of the fastest job growth post-recession. You've been a really healthy economy in that way, at 2.9% growth, greater than places like Kansas City and the Cleveland area, which still face job deficits. However, in terms of the share of 25 to 64-year-olds that are working, Indianapolis is actually the lowest performer among this group. This region has seen a 2.6 percentage point decline in the share of your working age population that is working today compared to pre-recession, and that's the fastest decline among these markets shown here. What that means is that we need to double our efforts to create more jobs, to pull the unemployed and the underemployed into the workplace, and we need better jobs with good pay so that our households are better off. Now, to do that, we do need to adopt a new model of economic development centered around trade, which is why today's export plan is so essential. Economies can only grow and generate income for workers if the firms and industries are able to capture net revenue from the sale of high-quality products and services to customers outside of the region or around the globe. Trade from your key clusters, whether it's auto and medical device manufacturing, drugs and medical diagnostics, architecture and engineering services, these really traded sector firms create good-paying jobs, they support the growth of a lot of local jobs, and they generate the overall wealth and productivity of a region. But to create quality jobs and opportunities, the other thing state and local leaders need to do is also focus less on business recruitment, which nets 2% of job growth on average, and instead they need to focus on the real source of economic growth in our states and regions, which on average is about 90% of job growth comes from existing firms and startups. So from an economic development perspective, exports matters because it's key to business expansion. So given this backdrop, what I want to do today is reinforce why exports and global engagement matter, why metros are key to global trade, and how regions are beginning to innovate to compete in the global marketplace. So let's talk first about this global imperative. Now, to start, global trade matters because the bulk of future global economic growth, 79%, is taking place outside of the United States. Now, this growth reflects the expansion of the middle class in many emerging markets. Today, the bulk of middle-class consumers are found in the mature markets of the US, EU, Japan, or NAFTA partners. You can see those in the blue slides. But by 2050, the OECD predicts that the picture will change dramatically, with more than half of the world's consumers to come from the 1 billion-plus populations of China and India. And meanwhile, North America is going to shrink to 6% of global middle-class consumers. So if you're doing business now in North America, including Mexico, Canada, that is no longer going to be sufficient. Now, if we find a way to export more, it will have great benefits to our regional economy. It will lead to higher levels of job growth and higher levels of output growth. And these are good quality jobs, as I've said before. Exporting firms, whether in services or manufacturing, pay 20 to 17% more in wages than firms in non-exporting sectors. And going global is good for businesses, too. Small and mid-sized manufacturers who exported right up to the recession actually saw their revenues grow by 37% compared to non-exporters who saw their revenues decline. And this demonstrates the benefits of having a diversified market portfolio. And the benefits of exporting seems to be breaking through. In the US, you're starting to see a lot more companies beginning to export, rising to about 305,000 exporters today. The challenge is we don't have enough exporters that are exporting year to year. Rather than firms just dabbling in exports or stumbling into exports accidentally, what we need is to better identify and work with firms that have the capacity and the proven product to be consistent, intentional exporters. Now, the flip side of exports is foreign direct investment, which is also a key component of many regions' global trade strategies. Now, FDI here refers to the foreign-owned establishments that move into a new market or the infusion of capital into a firm in the form of global private equity funds or mergers and acquisitions. Now, just like global trade and the growth of the middle class abroad, FDI too is expanding worldwide, reaching about $1.3 trillion today. But unfortunately, of that level, the foreign investment going to the US has essentially stayed flat since the 1980s. And because of that, the US is now capturing just 12% of global FDI, which again reinforces the rise of global competition today. There are simply more choices for highly mobile firms and capital. Now, like exports, if we are intentional how we take advantage of growing foreign investment, these have real benefits. Foreign-owned firms certainly create jobs that pay good wages, but the real promise of foreign investment is that foreign firms are major exporters and major investors in R&D, bringing in new innovation, new technology to the US that we wouldn't have otherwise. Now think about this. Toyota, for instance, brought lean manufacturing to the US. German firms like Siemens, BMW, Volkswagen bring a strong commitment to training apprenticeships, which are now being adopted by US firms and states. Swiss pharmaceutical giant Novartis invested in a major medical research partnership with MIT, which is strengthening Boston's position as a hub of life science solutions. So in short, foreign firms can truly increase our innovation might. So the bottom line from all this is that boosting exports and foreign investment is really critical to positioning the region for growth and prosperity in this hyper-connected global economy, which the mayor talked about. And the Indianapolis region is well positioned on both of these fronts. You already have a high degree of exporting and foreign investments taking place in this region. But to make further progress on trade, regions also have to be at the leading edge of product development, what we call these advanced industries that are supported by innovation, human capital, and modern infrastructure. So we just released a report recently where we found that the U.S. is home to about 50 segments of advanced industries that cut across manufacturing, energy, and services. These industries are considered advanced because they make relatively high investments in R&D, and they employ a relatively high share of scientists and engineers, what we call STEM workers, who can translate that research into commercial applications. These advanced industries, just like exports, not surprisingly, pay good jobs, offer wages that are twice as high as those found in other sectors, and further, these jobs are accessible, with about 1 in 2 of these AI jobs requiring a worker to not have a college degree. And advanced industries also matter to growth and wealth creation. They make up about 9% of all jobs, nearly 1/5 of GDP, and they contribute the vast majority of exports, patents, private sector R&D in the country. Now, the good news is the greater Indianapolis has advanced industries that are making an outsized contribution to this region's economy. 1/4 of your economy is anchored in advanced industries, which is higher than the national share at 17%. And your largest advanced industry sectors by employment size are pharmaceuticals, computer systems design, architecture and engineering, and motor vehicle parts. But the fastest growing advanced industry segments here in terms of output, data processing, R&D services. So you really have an edge in advanced industries. But to build on those advanced industries or continue their growth, we need skilled workers in STEM, as I mentioned before. And this chart reinforces that the more you learn, the more you earn. So education skills also a real platform for upward mobility. However, if you hold these degrees and work in a STEM occupation, for instance, in an advanced industry, your wage advantage is even higher, even if you only have a high school diploma. Now, in Indianapolis, there are about 179,000 STEM jobs, and interestingly, 51% of the STEM jobs in this region do not require you to have a college degree. These are occupations such as in computers or medical diagnostics. So again, STEM jobs are not limited to just the highly skilled or the elite workers segments of our population, but really can be attainable for many of our workers. And finally, modern multimodal infrastructure matters to trade, and this was something that was noted in the region's export plan. Now, this graphic, I'm going to have to explain a little bit. It shows that the Indianapolis region moves about $149 billion worth of goods in and out of the region. And again, goods matter because you're a more manufacturing export-oriented than the U.S. as a whole. Now, what these figures show are they're not just about the goods that pass through this region, either through truck or through rail. This is really a measure of the total value of goods your economy produces and then exchanges with other regions, either through the firms or through the customers, essentially your final destination of your goods. So the top 8 markets where your goods go to essentially are in the Midwest, Chicago, St. Louis, and Louisville, but you do have 2 major international markets that are the final destination of your products, China and Canada. The reason this matters is that you have to understand what you make, where these products go, so that you can design the right kind of freight infrastructure investments, whether the right mix of air, truck, train, or ship, that reflect the way your goods actually flow out of the economy. So, why metros? Why do they matter to global trade? Well, at the core, just like the mayor said, cities and metropolitan areas are at the units of the global economy. And as such, they concentrate all the very assets that we just talked about that support a thriving trade economy. The 100 largest metropolitan areas, for instance, are at the centers of trade. They generate 72% of all service exports, and they move the bulk of our air cargo. They are the hubs of innovation in terms of all their advanced industries and generating the bulk of our patents. And they are, of course, magnets of talent, attracting and retaining a lot of our skilled workers. And that's why 100 largest metropolitan areas generate 75% of the nation's GDP. And in Indiana, there are 16 metropolitan areas or parts of bi-state metropolitan areas that drive this state's economy and the state's exports. And these include metros as diverse as Fort Wayne, South Bend, parts of the Louisville area, and the central region of Indianapolis. But the other reason why metros matter is not just economically, but also what I would call small p politically in the delivery of exports themselves. While exports is often, considered a federal responsibility, metros actually play a very unique and vital role to export success in a way that the feds and the states actually can't do alone. So the federal government is critical to open new markets, to provide export financing, to actually have presence and connection in foreign markets across the globe in a way that a state or a region cannot have coverage. But the states then also played their own role, which is they were really good at organizing, hosting trade missions, leveraging the role of the governor, creating a distinct state brand, providing export training services to firms. But cities and metropolitan areas are where the hard work of recruiting and connecting firms to global customers happen. Regional chambers, economic development professionals, mayors, county officials, you all know your companies best. And you are uniquely positioned to reach out to individual firms and executives, determine who has the best products or capacity to go global, get them to commit to global expansion, and then connect them to the existing resources, whether it's the U.S. Commercial Service, the state, or others, and to help them make that sale. And regional leaders can also begin to align all the different services to make them more coordinated and transparent to firms, because many firms don't even know these services exist. And regional leaders finally can align all of these with other aspects of economic development to really create the culture shift toward greater global trade and awareness in the community. So what are the emerging innovations we're seeing in metropolitan areas to support global trade and investment? The first is that metros are beginning to organize for trade, and thanks to our partner with JPMorgan Chase, the Global City Initiative is really giving these cities and metropolitan areas the tools, whether it's the research, the public forums like today, the peer networks, to really become more globally connected and globally competitive. Now, critical to GCI is the Global Cities Exchange, which is a peer-to-peer action network to help more than 24 metropolitan areas execute global trade and investment strategies. And we're really proud to count Indianapolis as a member of this exchange. And not only is Indianapolis here, obviously, but we have a lot of the new members of the exchange in the room today, places as diverse as Seattle, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. Now, as each metropolitan area puts together their plan, they're focusing on their distinctive niche in the global marketplace: sustainability and energy efficiency in Portland, health and wellness in Minneapolis, life sciences in San Diego, education, health services in Central New York. What has been the impact to date from these efforts? What I would say is Portland already, one of our early pilots, has won contracts in Brazil and Japan because rapidly urbanizing and mature markets want to build, quote, green cities. So Portland was smart. They branded and packaged a group of firms that represent a core tradable competency in sustainable land use design planning, architecture, EV technology, and the manufacture of clean energy buses and transit cars. That's why they were winning these contracts. The region was also awarded a major federal freight planning and implementation grant recently so they can unlock freight bottlenecks for their top exporting industry, which is computer electronics. And shortly, you're going to hear from Mary Ellen from Louisville, who's going to give you more stories about successes coming out of the Louisville region on how they're helping small and mid-sized manufacturers successfully export. The second things we're seeing is that states and metropolitan areas are beginning to invest in what matters. On innovation, metro areas like Albany, Columbus, and Greenville are developing global R&D centers to move their key industries up the value chain. You are doing a lot of that here with the forthcoming Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. On human capital, New York City, for instance, is beginning to work with the state on P-Tech. I think many of you have probably heard about this. This is a collaboration between industry, public schools, community colleges to give low-income high school students a mix of work-based learning opportunities, a high school diploma, and a 2-year degree by the time they graduate. And they often land an entry-level position in a partner firm at that point. Given P-Tech's success, Governor Cuomo has now announced plans to expand that program statewide. And meanwhile, we've seen Michigan, South Carolina, Louisville, Lexington, we're going to hear about this today, also launch apprenticeship programs to make sure they build a pipeline of young adults entering the manufacturing sector. And on infrastructure, and we have an example here from San Antonio, which decommissioned or repurposed a decommissioned Air Force base into an aerospace industrial park to really create a logistics hub right along a key trade corridor. And finally, I want to talk about the fact that cities are beginning to network globally themselves, building their own bilateral trade partnerships. Now, Mayor Ballard mentioned to me yesterday that he has doubled the number of sister cities for Indianapolis. Well, Chicago and Mexico City, for example, are also sister cities. But they fundamentally overhauled their sister city relationship, turning their cultural and immigrant ties into economic ones. And so what did they do? Mayor Manuel and Mayor Mancera of Mexico City came together about a year ago, and they signed the first ever Global Cities Economic Partnership. The goal, to mutually boost exports, FDI, entrepreneurship, innovation in their shared industries over the next 2 years. As a result of this partnership already, we are seeing results. There's a formal tourism agreement between these two cities to work together on business, tourism, and student travel. There are already business opportunities being explored in pharma and machining manufacturing, and now there is a new partnership launched just a few months ago between 1871, a startup incubator in Chicago, and Startup Mexico to help the entrepreneurs in the two markets open up and launch businesses simultaneously in the two cities, including giving them shared workspaces so the entrepreneurs can do market research, build business relationships, and find capital in each city. So let me close with how I began. Our cities and metro areas must adopt a new model of economic growth if we hope to help our industries, our workers, our communities benefit from today's global forces rather than get left behind. At the center of this model is trade, but exports and FDI will succeed best if it's aligned with other economic development efforts to accelerate innovation, especially in advanced industries, to create a skilled and globally diverse workforce, and build a modern and globally connected infrastructure. This is the path to global prosperity. With your new export plan and many of your industry, business, civic, public partnerships, I'd say that Indianapolis, you are well on your way to being a global city. So congratulations on this major milestone. Thank you very much. It is now my pleasure to introduce the president of the Indy Chamber and a good friend of Brookings and JPMorgan Chase, Michael Huber.
Thanks again for spending part of your morning with us. Great turnout. We don't have a lot of time if we're going to get to the panel, and I really want to hear from the panel too. So I'm going to share with you some of the highlights around the unveiling of our Indy Regional Export Plan. Some of the suspense was killed earlier when we handed you the plan, and many of you are already reading it. So no dramatic music or drum roll, but I do want to call your attention to some we think are some interesting findings as we've gone through this process in the last year, and I do have a few acknowledgments at the end. And this is all in the plan. One of the early steps that we completed as we entered this partnership with Brookings and JPMorgan Chase was to do an assessment of where we are strong, where we have strong export industries. This is in the plan, not going to spend much time with it. A few things that may be surprising jump out at you. Aircraft products and parts was a much stronger export sector than I knew. Royalties is interesting. Royalties includes things like software licensing, so it picks up that exciting marketing tech sector that we have in Indianapolis. The point of this graph, though, is some of our competitor regions that are really hot for talent, destinations for talent, like Denver, Austin, and Charlotte, I would argue would kill to have this concentration of export industries that we have in Indiana and in Indianapolis, and I would argue that we need to talk about it more. Our export intensity compared to other cities, and particularly in the Midwest, is very strong. It's kind of hard to read, but we're essentially second. We're that orange line. Baton Rouge, Louisiana is a bit of an outlier because of their strength in chemical production and chemical exports. But we already have a lot to work with. If you go back to the bubble chart earlier in pharma and in manufacturing. One comment about manufacturing is going to be a very strong sector for the Indy region for decades. It just looks so different than it did 20 years ago or even 10 years ago because it's so automated. We'll talk more about that in a second. We also provided a world map that shows the strength of our exports and with respect to our trading partners, and a lot of different interpretations of this map. One is we need to reinforce that Canada and Mexico are really, really important trading partners with the United States, and this reflects Indiana's relationships. But the red countries, developing countries, and I know this is so basic, but this is something that we frankly haven't talked enough about. As standards of living rise very fast in developing nations, so does demand for U.S.-produced goods and Indiana-produced goods and services. So a lot of times in our media, we get very sort of inward focused, and we get, with our own sort of recovery out of our own U.S. recession, we don't talk a lot about the connection of rapidly rising standards of living in other countries and what that means for Indiana-produced goods and services. And Brookings has really helped us make some of those connections as we've gone through this process. The last graph just shows per capita personal income, and this is something that as a region we make it our business. Governor and Commerce Secretary Victor Smith, who are here as well, are very concerned about this. And we still, as a state and as a region, lag behind in per capita personal income. Now, there are probably 100 historical reasons for why that is the case, including this big transition that we're going through as a strong manufacturing economy. But we have to keep our eye on this ball. And that's one of the reasons that we've pursued this export strategy that we've released today. I'm gonna hit some of the high points so that we can get on to our panel, but these are things to, I guess, keep in mind as you read the plan, and we hope you will read the plan because it signals a real shift in the way that we do economic development. It signals a real meaningful expansion of the toolkit that we use. Number one finding, we have hundreds of small to medium-sized enterprises in our region who could start exporting tomorrow, but they just don't know how. There's a very specific information gap that we need to fill. We can do things like create online portals and information resources, but also build some expertise that knows, especially in sectors where we're strong, how we can essentially train and fill those information gaps and help our small to medium-sized enterprise become sophisticated exporters. Thanks to the data resources that Brookings has brought us, we also can connect them with contacts in other countries and help them focus where they need to develop relationships. Second, I showed you the graph earlier, we have been falling behind our peer cities in wage growth. I don't talk a lot about about that out there because part of my job is Chamber of Commerce, rah, 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 but it is a fact and we need to keep our eye on that ball. The fact is that exporting companies provide wages that are 17% higher for equivalent positions. So something about exporting companies, maybe it's that they're investing in retention and they tend to invest more in R&D as a result of exporting more, but their wages are higher, and this is a great opportunity for us as a region. Also, if we are, again, to the mayor's point, being self-critical, we've got a great track record in Indiana and in central Indiana for being deal makers on the transactional aspect of economic development. But the fact is, as Amy's data showed us, companies don't pack up and move like they used to. We're much more likely to create job growth and create wealth by growing our own. So we've got to expand our toolkit beyond the transactional to really understand where the growth is going to happen in our own homegrown companies. Helping them to be stronger exporters is a meaningful way that we can really move the ball. And again, number 4, we need to reinforce in the mainstream, and frankly, we need to talk about a lot more how rising standards of living in other countries can increase demand for our goods and services if we do this right. In addition to helping our companies become better exporters, we've got a real opportunity and a huge challenge with workforce. And again, if I'm being self-critical, for too long we've been too disconnected in terms of economic development and the transactional aspect of economic development and workforce and training. And I'm not just talking about 4-year degrees, frankly. We're seeing a huge need and a gap in the 1- and 2-year certifications. And so that's something, frankly, people smarter than me are working on this at the state and at the regional level, but you will see a stronger tie between workforce strategy and economic development strategy become a part of the regions and the state's focus. We already know that. It's all about regional collaboration. And I got to give the mayor credit for creating the CICEO, essentially the Council of Mayors from the 9 counties 7 years ago, who have established meaningful collaborations in areas like transit, like water resources, and now regional economic development. These sectors that we're talking about are not in municipal silos. They are regional sectors. Commuting patterns are regional. And some of the biggest thinking that's happening in this area, I have to give the governor and Commerce Secretary Victor Smith credit. The Regional Cities report from last fall, if you haven't read it, Google regional cities or IDC regional cities. We're a shameless supporter of the Regional Cities bill, and we're tracking that as it goes through the state legislature, the General Assembly. But those are some things that give us confidence that we can do this, right? Because we're not starting from scratch. There's tremendous momentum around regional collaboration in a meaningful way. There are 3 things that we're going to do immediately. And as the mayor said, it's going to take us a little bit of time to build this practice within regional economic development, but there are 3 things that we can do immediately. We're going to create an online export microsite that helps small to medium-sized companies understand how they can become better exporters, put them in touch with resources like the Export-Import Bank and Small Business Administration tools. We also are going to develop real-world export profiles of some of our strong exporters. Let me back up a second. So here, this is another really interesting finding. Eli Lilly is really, really sophisticated at exporting their products globally, right? Rolls-Royce. We've got really sophisticated exporters in our market, and they're a handful, and they really dominate this bubble graph. But then there's a significant drop-off to our mid-size and small companies in terms of their skill. We need to do a better job of helping our seasoned experts that we have in our own market help train and teach the small and medium-sized enterprises on how to do it. And then finally, we need to grow our local media coverage that focuses on international business. If we can't tell the story, we're not even going to be able to get started. And so that's, again, it's kind of a double-edged sword that a lot of us in this room talk about all the time about our Hoosier humility. Sometimes we're not as proud as we need to be in telling our story worldwide. A few acknowledgments before the panel. We would not have been able to get to this point where we can add to the toolkit in a meaningful way without the leadership of Brookings, specifically Amy Liu, Merrick Gutman, Ben Sayo. Where's Ben? Ben, are you here? Ben Sayo from Syracuse, New York, he really built this practice in Syracuse, New York, and he's also on assignment to Brookings. He's been fantastic. JPMorgan Chase, this program would not exist without the significant investment of JPMorgan Chase. Many JPMorgan Chase executives are in from out of town, and Al Smith's personal leadership made this possible. We owe Al a lot for us having gotten to this point. Our core team, Dr. Gil Latz from IUPUI, you'll hear more from him in a minute. Professor Roberto Kersey from Butler University. Kathy Davis has been our consultant. It's really real thrill to work with her perspective as a former lieutenant governor and leader in state and municipal government. My own staff spent months and months on this. Marty Vonnugs, Brian Gilday, and Ashley Elrod, we're very much indebted to them. And also visible leadership from the mayor, from Mayor Ballard, and from the governor. Victor Smith, Commerce Secretary, is here. Chris Cotterill from the IEDC is here for lending some staff time to help us get to this point. So anyway, I'm very excited to hear from our export panel. We hope that you will read the plan, because it does signal an exciting new direction for us, a great expansion of the toolkit. Right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Merrick Gutman, who we've worked closely, with whom we've worked closely over the past year. He's the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Global Initiatives for the Brookings Institute, and I found out last night he's also a diehard fan of Liverpool Football Club, for you soccer fans. Please welcome Merrick Gutman.
Michael's a fan of Everton, so it's all fun. While I get wired up and the rest of the panel as well, I did want to highlight a couple of things from what Amy said, which is about the presence of 12 metropolitan areas around the country that are here yesterday and then joining us today. Some of them are new to this Global Cities Initiative process, are just beginning what Indianapolis is now launching in terms of creating export strategies, and several that have been advising and helping in the process with Indianapolis that were part of our earlier cohorts. So if you are in the room, I know Houston is here. They're very excited about your weather at the moment. I'll just read off. If you are here, just please stand up to demonstrate that we have a real national support here. Houston, Baltimore, Kansas City, Salt Lake, Seattle, Fresno, St. Louis, Philadelphia, Chicago, Louisville, Wichita, Milwaukee, Syracuse, and Portland. So what you are doing here, thank you very much. What you're doing here in Indianapolis is really part of the leading edge on a national effort. And I also want to emphasize, which I don't think was mentioned before, you were competitively selected to participate in this. We are vastly oversubscribed in the level of interest from across the country, metros that are excited about the message of changing their economic development activities, focusing more on strengthening their global economic connections and competitiveness for sustained economic growth and job creation. And so what Indianapolis did in applying, and Gil, coming from Portland originally, was first in the door saying, can we start working on this in Indianapolis now? Because Portland was in the pilot phase. Indianapolis has demonstrated the interest, the commitment, and the institutional capacity to execute on this. Because we're making, as I said yesterday in another meeting, we're making bets on places to be successful. So I just wanted to emphasize up front that Indianapolis is, as Amy said and others, well-positioned, but was specifically selected because we all felt through a competitive process that you could be successful. So it's exciting to see results coming out of this and a long-term relationship going forward. I am going to introduce the panel now, and we have a representation of people who have been involved in the export planning process and other economic development activities and in the business community, because fundamentally this is all about business and the need for businesses to engage and support. It's not about the intermediaries. It is about the end results that drive economic growth, and that's the business community. And then also representative from Louisville to talk about how they have progressed from the point where you are now into implementation and how it links into, I think what Michael was saying, broader economic growth strategies that you're already starting to pursue through your regional economic development process and some of the other issues of global competitiveness. So Michael preempted a number of these things. You know people on this panel. I'll start with actually Jeff Day, who was not introduced and is in the middle. Jeff is the business representative in this group. Jeff has a long experience dealing in large companies, but also really emphasized on both sides as an entrepreneur and then somebody who's been assisting small and medium-sized businesses, especially looking at Asia for market opportunities. So can speak both as a business person who's trying to develop markets. EHOB, most recently, medical device company looking at China market specifically now, but also the experience as somebody who's been helping a range of small businesses to deal with these questions historically. Kathy Davis, former lieutenant governor, former city controller, focusing now on helping organizations think strategically around economic growth strategies. Gil Letts, I think I had a long title, Associate Vice President, International Affairs, Indiana University, and Associate Vice Chancellor for International Affairs at IUPUI, and again came from Portland when we were starting the process of the first pilot projects. And then Mary Ellen Wiederwall, who's from Louisville. She worked closely with the mayor as his deputy chief of staff and strategic initiatives, and has moved on to take over the comprehensive Louisville effort around economic development, broader than exports, Louisville forward, and in collaboration with people down the road in Lexington. So if you think you have regional collaboration challenges, you can imagine that. She'll talk about that a little bit. First, actually, I want to start with you, Jeff, because again, this is about the business perspective and responding to business needs and opportunities. Could you describe a little bit about your experience? I mentioned looking at different markets, but both as a business person and, again, the context of working with other small and medium-sized businesses, what some of the challenges have been and the needs that were going unfulfilled to try to expand internationally.
Sure. Well, exports used to be thought to be something that only multinationals dealt with. They had the staffs, they had the money, they had the manpower to get the job done. And I had a great experience learning through the GEs and GMs and Delphis of the world of how to grow businesses internationally. But the point has come that small and medium-sized enterprises need to be evaluating these opportunities. And in some cases, the opportunities abroad are greater than what they are even here at home. An interesting example in Indiana is we have one of the leading premium poultry producers in the United States located in Indiana. And about 10 years ago, I had the opportunity to start working with them on understanding if there was an opportunity in China. The U.S. duck market is 20 million ducks a year. The Chinese duck market is 2 billion ducks a year. So we pretty quickly saw the opportunity was significant for them. They dedicated the time, the manpower, and the investment to get their plan moving. This year, they are targeted to sell 2 million day-old ducks from Indiana to China to replenish the genetic stock that was depleted over a period of years in China. Today, there are 350 million ducklings from Indiana, with Indiana genetics located there. So I guess the point of that is that even in operations where you wouldn't think that someone could export day-old ducks, there are tremendous opportunities. One of the problems that small and mid-sized companies have is they don't have the depth of management. A lot of $50, $100, $150 million companies have 3, 5, 7 key managers who are busy doing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So the mentoring that I saw in the plan, I think, is critically important. It's not as easy maybe to do as it sounds, but what we do in my group is do this kind of mentoring, but then have people on the ground to help implement, because implementation is really what it's about. The other thing I like about the plan is collaboration. We have too many silos across the country. All my friends who are in various businesses, they're busy doing what they do. They want to help other people, but they don't know how. And if it can be facilitated through this enterprise to bring more people together to share ideas, I think it'll be very beneficial. Whether it's a law firm or an accounting firm, or whether it's the city or the state that puts on seminars like this, the demand is huge to learn about what's going on internationally and how you can collaborate. Another most recent opportunity to collaborate is with EHOB Inc. EHOB is on the Near West Side. They produce medical devices to remediate and to prevent pressure ulcers. The Chinese medical market is growing between 40% and 80% a year. The opportunity is huge. And EHOB had the vision to being one of the smaller companies, actually, to try to put together an export plan, has done a great job of supporting it. And in terms of collaboration, we have found other Indiana companies and other non-Indiana companies to tag along with our efforts to fill into the channels of distribution that we're creating. I think if there could be some kind of a process that facilitates that sharing and bringing small and mid-sized businesses together, I think it'll accelerate the export initiative.
So Kathy, building on that, you and your partners, Butler, IUPUI, the Chamber did a lot of business interviews, surveys. A huge part of the development of the export plan was a market assessment. From what Jeff says, were there other key areas that are reflected in the plan that came out as needs, gaps, or issues in the system and in reaching companies that you think were highlighted then in your final product?
We found that there were a range of needs that need to be addressed. I think first is that we all need to understand what a great upside opportunity this is for the entire community and for almost any business. You have often reminded us when we started this project in November of 2013, Brookings data quoted to us was that 70% of the purchasing power is outside the United States and 4% of U.S. companies export. This year, you're back saying that it's 80% of the purchasing power. So just in these 16 months that we've been involved in this project, there may be some rounding in there, but the amount of ability to buy our products outside the world, outside the United States compared to inside is just growing and growing. I find that a phenomenal statistic, and I think that's one that we all need to get familiar with. But in order to get there, we need to see the bigger opportunity, but then every company needs to have visibility of who specifically is buying their products at a price, and are there already supply channels exist that they can meld into? And by the way, because of our successful export industry already concentrated in our larger companies, we have at least 24 that we talk to, suppliers of export services who know, the soup to nuts, what needs to happen, or are experts on the legal side, the financial, the physical distribution, the making a connection, who can be your distributor in the market country that you're going to. And these are all things that we can provide. And I think the Chamber has stood up and said they're ready to be at the center of creating this system of supports for the services that help companies figure out where their opportunities are, where their strengths are, what they're going to need to build in order to realize those opportunities, and then connect you up with the right folks to help and really provide many of the resources that the successful exporters have themselves, but use all of our information tools and our expertise to spread that out among the rest of us.
So you have a number of tactics in order to accomplish those goals, overcoming the fragmentation in the system, trying to be more proactive about reaching target industry clusters. Particularly the small and medium-sized businesses that aren't thinking about this and are too busy to be saying, oh, maybe I should think about this. Among that long list, I mean, the challenge for all of the places that have been working on these issues is transitioning from the strategy, which is a reasonably succinct and thin document with specific tactics in it, into operations. So what do you see as the real needs? Michael mentioned a few immediate steps that can be taken. What do you see as the real needs in these tactics to take it into implementation, and what the community needs to do in order to rally around that?
That's the core question, and I see it in two parts. And Gil is going to certainly help me with the second part on how do we help everybody understand their roles in this change. Michael said that we start, I think, from the ground up, which is how do we give businesses the basic tools to understand what their opportunity is. So to me, that means taking the data that you have provided us, which is who are we exporting to now, which products to which specific markets, and how has that been changing over 10 years and the last few years? What hints does that give us about what the opportunities are? And then how do you allow any business to drill down into their particular products, look at the market opportunities, maybe even look at other metro areas who are in those markets who are now potentially our partners for serving those markets rather than our competitors for business, kind of a whole new orientation. Giving businesses a tool that gives them that market research and then helps them understand what it takes to be ready. So I think that's where we begin by calling in. Here's a one-stop shop that helps you understand specifically your opportunity and specifically what steps you need to take and who can help you take them to serve that market.
So Gil, the universities, Butler and IUPUI, played a very significant role in actually evaluating, creating this fundamental strategy. How do you see the role of universities going forward on the implementation and support for the effort?
Well, let me start out by referring back to the mayor's observations that there's a world economy out there that we need to understand, or a global economy that we need to understand, and that represents a huge opportunity for our metropolitan area and for the state. And I think what IUPUI and Butler have discovered through this process is the fact that education is critically important to understanding this global economy, this high degree of interdependence that we have today that has existed to an extent throughout history, but is accelerated, as Amy put it, the hyperconnectivity that we find. And I think that when we refer to education, the plan you'll see in strategy 5, there's a tactic number 5 that talks about the role that we can play to educate community leaders with disciplinary expertise and global awareness, provide professional development, and offer industry and business specific consulting and training. So the 3 key things there that I want to emphasize for everyone to be thinking with us more about, with us, the academic community, is how can we help you be successful at understanding these new models of trade? What kind of analysis can we provide in addition to what we already provide? And how do we make this culture shift to a more international or global frame of mind? This is all about partnerships and relationships, as was indicated earlier by virtually every other speaker. The university, speaking for IUPUI, has just completed a strategic plan that looks at community-university partnerships as who we are and who we want to be. We have things to contribute, but we also have to learn more from the business community and the non-governmental organizations and the private sector about how we can assist in the analysis and understand better your educational needs. So it's those types of problems, challenges, and opportunities that we think, as we understand them, we can better solve, that will lead to graduating students or providing certificate programs or conducting collaborative research that can advance the region economy to connect up with the opportunities for new dimensions of relationship building and partnership.
So I want to bring Mary Ellen in here quickly. You've been through the first implementation year or so of an export strategy. So we want to hear a little bit about, obviously, the successes, but also some of the challenges that you face that Indianapolis is going to encounter. And then also, how exports, it's a narrow segment of trying to fit into a regional economic development strategy. And so lots of advantages to it, and there's a good entry point. But could you also describe how the export piece fits into a broader regional collaboration, which we've heard a lot about, the need for true regional collaboration across jurisdictions and sectors, and how it's informed what you all are doing around economic development more generally?
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity. Greetings from your neighbor from the south, where it is strangely we're having worse weather than you. Delightful temperatures as well as a foot of snow on the ground. Come visit, it's lovely. We have bourbon, it's great. You have pharma, we have bourbon. And on behalf of Mayor Fisher, I do want to thank the Brookings Institution, JPMorgan Chase, and the Chase Foundation for what has been a wonderful collaboration over several years now and continuing. The work that we've done together has fundamentally changed how we view economic development. That's partly why I'm sitting here today. We blew up our old organization and completely retooled and started over. And it was last June, actually, when we were sitting in a room like this together in Louisville. The weather was much nicer. I think I had on a seersucker suit. And we were sitting with our friends from Lexington. So regionalism to us is really messy. Regionalism is all the way from Louisville to Lexington into southern Indiana. It's 2 states, and we count 22 counties in this region, including 5 that are in southern Indiana. And so we have a lot of different kinds of collaboration that we do, Mayor, across multiple layers of government and business. Everything that I've heard here today is so familiar, and familiar to the discussion we were having in Louisville about 8 months ago. I want to talk a little bit about SMEs. So you get to learn a new vocabulary every time you take on a new initiative like this, small and medium-sized enterprises. And that's where you're going to find a lot of this action. And this is really blocking and tackling. You know, we have a lot of great exporters in Louisville, particularly in our manufacturing sector. If you drive a Ford, a small one or a big one, it might have been made in Louisville. If you're driving a Michelin tires, we probably made the raw product in Louisville. We have a long history in manufacturing. That's our biggest bubble on that advanced industries chart. But the growth opportunities, while those are amazing there, those companies kind of know what they're doing. Like you mentioned, Lilly, they've already got a pretty sophisticated operation. But small and medium-sized enterprises really need our help, and need our help as government officials and economic developers connecting into the resources that are available to them, whether it's through the Export-Import Bank, you mentioned the SBDC. We have a very significant World Trade Center operation that provides training. So we are doing all of those things, and it was actually through a grant with the Chase Foundation that we were able to take that to a new level. Because even companies of a significant size, so up to $40, $50 million, $50 million companies don't have the daily resources. There's 5 people running that company every day, and who's going to take the 20 hours a week it takes to figure out how to export it all or export to a new company, a new country. And so that's the kind of work that we've taken on to kind of be that middle person, say, here's how you can help, here's where you can go, here's how we can help, point you to those resources. And then we've had the mini grant program through the Chase Foundation that helped those companies go to new countries, go to a new trade show, and just that little extra they needed to get over the hump to export a new product or export to a new country. And so you find that in this plan, and that's been a real learning for us. That's what it takes. It takes that real, very tactical work. But when we were together in Louisville in June, frankly, it wasn't exports that dominated the conversation. It was workforce. Workforce was the issue that quickly bubbled up as we met together regionally, business leaders and government leaders, realizing that we had a big disconnect between the supply side and the demand side. And so the supply side, doing its thing, love academia. Demand side was sitting there doing its thing, saying, okay, I'm going to take your next crop of graduates and I'm going to pick the ones I want and go on, everything will be fine. And then that kind of stopped happening. And you didn't really get the ones you needed. You didn't have enough engineers. And by the way, where were the middle skills? And so that was what our group very quickly honed in on, was we had a big disconnect. And we actually had a group of employers in Louisville together with us, came together on something called the Blueprint. And that blueprint was what was rolled out at our meeting like this in June. And it was the first step towards solving this disconnect, saying, specifically around the middle school skills in advanced manufacturing, we needed to change what we were doing. That group of employers actually put out an RFP, challenged academia, and said, here's what we need. You respond to this. 3 institutions did respond, and ultimately our local community and technical college was the winner of that RFP. A few weeks ago, we were able to announce a new partnership called Kentucky FAME. It's the Federation of Advanced Manufacturing Education that will provide apprenticeship programs that actually are true apprenticeships. They work, get paid at the company, and go to school. And in 2 years, they have an associate's degree in advanced manufacturing technician certification and a job.
So Jeff, shifting back to you for a second, and what you heard from Louisville about other connections to other areas of activity, and what you've seen or we've discussed a little bit here on your interactions with small, medium-sized businesses, what of these components is most helpful to focus on first as a step? We've got an entry portal. How do you identify the companies effectively, reaching through the networks of business organizations and city or county functions? Talk a little bit about how what you've heard fits into what you've seen in working with these companies directly.
I like hearing the mini grant concept, because a lot of these companies, they make money, but it's a big investment to take that $30,000 trade show or that $50,000 trade show to open a door. And until you go there, you don't understand what's there. And it's really hard to make an educated decision. I think I was part of a state delegation not too long ago that was full of economic development people and no business people. By none, 3 or 4 business people. And for any of you sending delegations abroad, make sure you have business people. Because in this particular case, there were 50 to 100 entrepreneurs from this country who came to meet business people. And there were less than 5 of us in a delegation of 40. And we're the ones who could talk about the problems and the opportunities. And as good as economic development is, it's a door opener, but not a make it happen. And it's not an easy solution to get the businesses engaged, but I think these mini grants are a tremendous idea. Even sponsoring some of these companies to go on these delegations to make it easier for them to make the decision to say yes. Because once they go there and they see the opportunity, I mean, where else can any business person go and see 50 to 100 entrepreneurs who want to find a partner? That's huge. All of us would like that as a businessman.
Right. And so we heard a little bit about, you didn't hear so much about your challenges, actually. We like your bourbon, but so what do you see, Kathy, going forward? You've got an export plan that's out there with these tactics and some particular steps that are going to be taken. You're integrating into or leading into a regional economic development strategy so that it fits the global elements into the SEDS, the process. How do you see that relationship? And also, do you see the integration with other regional actors? Because you have the chamber, you have the mayor. The mayor's been, as we know, very active in trying to, over the past several years, integrate with other parts of the region. I think the most interesting story, actually, from Louisville is the relationship between Louisville and Lexington, which have traditionally been competitors. Actually, before I tell the story about how this all happened, and then I'll come back to you.
So everybody in this room, whether you're from Kentucky or Louisville, you love basketball, right? We've already had one basketball reference? Okay. So if you're not from around here, U of L and UK, Louisville, Lexington, huge rivalry. Well, and so even these two cities, not 70 miles apart from each other and having much more in common economically than apart, never really worked together. But we had a unique opportunity in 2010 where we had new civic leadership, new mayors in both of those cities, both of them businessmen, Mayor Fisher and Mayor Jim Gray in Lexington. And you're going to love this. This all started at a U of L UK basketball game. And they went to the game together. It was in Louisville that year. And Mayor Fisher and Mayor Gray are sitting there together, you know, isn't this great? We're together, blue sweater, red sweater. And Mayor Fisher says, hey, Jim, I really want to do something together. Let's plan something, some initiative to do together. And Jim Gray, if he was sitting here, he would tell you, he said, sure, Greg. And he said, I thought Greg would get over it. Greg didn't get over it. And so this whole collaboration was born at a UK U of L basketball game and through these two entrepreneurial mayors who wanted to find a way to work together and find our common ground. And Brookings and our Metropolitan Business Plan gave us a chance to do that.
So that's a story of, you know, two competitive regions, two separate, actually technically metropolitan areas, although not that far apart, that identified common assets and then worked toward a particular objective around traded sectors and exports and moving forward into other areas like FDI. So just operationally, how do you see this working at a regional scale, fitting into a regional economic development strategy, and then what kinds of other resources do you need in order to make sure this actually happens as it's described in this plan?
I think implementation happens at many levels at the same time. And our region, the Indy Chamber has reorganized itself so that regional economic development and local economic development and the global perspective are all within the same house working together, ready to merge the export plan with the global economic development strategy. I think our bubble chart shows that all of our efforts regionally, largely led by the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership and others, have worked to form multiple very strong clusters. Other metro areas did not have as many big clusters as we have to start with. So that's been a success. I mean, so we count off our, the collaborations that we've been successful at as a region, and I think really lay this one up as a big opportunity and keep that conversation going. One issue that I need to mention is, another one of our strengths is robust, redundant logistics. We are in a geographic sweet spot for overnight air freight to both coasts. We have a great interstate system. We have a great rail system. We have, 2 ports that require access, but we've got them in the state. And the Central Indiana Corporate Partnership through Connexus has been leading us in improvements to that. So we're very, very competitive at time-sensitive deliveries. We're less competitive on overall costs. And as good as our logistics are, our businesses tell us that transportation costs are a #1 barrier to exports. Well, we're working on that, and we want to keep working on that, and that's another one that is, still upside opportunity. So I think we do, we have those efforts going on in communication among leadership across the region. And then again, I think it is the execution of creating this infrastructure that allows an individual business to plug in, see their opportunity, see where to go, have all those resources be mapped out so it doesn't matter, where you raise your hand and say, I'd like help. You get visibility of what the region can do to support your initiative.
Gil, you have something to add on to that in terms of collaboration?
Well, I think specifically in the educational world, we already are committed to learning more about the world through professional development of our faculty, through sending students abroad, and through bringing international students who can help us understand their countries, particularly our students, many of whom won't necessarily have the opportunity or the privilege of studying abroad. But we could do those things so much better. We could make more of a community commitment, for example, to engaging our international students when they're here, culturally as well as through internships. We need to keep in better touch with them after they go back to their home countries, because they have their finger on the pulse, whatever job they take, that can help us be competitive and successful there, should we wish to try and sell to that market. We also have to think of more ways to send our students abroad. Indiana University is in the top 10 for this statistic, but Indiana University is not the only university in the state, and we have a huge need to create this frame of mind that is more globally understanding and aware. And I think one of the ways we can do that is by identifying, if we can't provide opportunities for everyone, leaders that we're generating who will help our community make the connections and partnerships that we're talking about how competition can also lead to collaboration through programs that we develop at the university. So it's doing the inventory, what are we doing now, how can we do it better, and as has been said and I mentioned earlier, how does collaboration, how does partnership, how does relationship building, not just in our metro area geographically, but what do we call our spheres of engagement around the world. And it's that shift of mind that I think enabled by technology and creating a dashboard of information and places to go for sources of advice and consultation that can really help us take that next step.
I'm going to start opening this up for questions in a minute. So if there's anyone who, and we have microphones somewhere in the back. So if anyone has any questions, identify yourselves. I have additional questions to continue here, but I did want to make certain that the participants got their interests addressed.
You're probably still going to come back to me on challenges.
And while we're pausing,
Exactly.
I think the trade shows and trade missions have been mentioned a couple of times, especially by Jeff and Mary Ellen. And I think that one other form of collaboration is the well-focused, well-attended, with the right people trade mission, to an actual customer destination. And that we pick those relationships very consciously and then send folks who have opportunities there, who represent the region, who represent the business community. That's how you meet the people that are going to help you do business on the ground over there. And we've talked about the value of incentives to help people participate, as well as, again, designing them to be very targeted.
Well, just building on that, actually, I'm going to turn to a person from the audience, Derek, conveniently sitting right there, from Portland. Amy mentioned what Portland did around, we often talk about this example because it's really clear and tangible. So Derek is from Greater Portland, Inc., and is kind of the quarterback organization for their region on their export strategy. Maybe you can give a little bit of sense, just tying back into what Kathy described, of how the focus on a particular trade sector, an underrepresented opportunity or undertapped opportunity organized toward a target market as opposed to saying who wants to go to China this year, how that was effective for you as a result of this effort.
Thanks, Merrick, and I appreciate the hospitality being here. It's very impressive what Indy is doing. What we've done in We Build Green Cities is to take our market assessment showed that we had a strong sector that really hadn't had a focused approach abroad, and so we targeted a specific market of Japan where we had expertise in our community that could help bring our companies over there to make specific export sales. And so it's been very targeted. It's aligned with some of the larger missions that go at the higher level, led by political and business leaders, but it's also just been a very specific, targeted connections with real business opportunities for companies where they've managed to sign an agreement that has led to direct contracts and sales regarding green building in Japan. It's now been expanded into some other developing countries we're looking at, but it remains very targeted rather than scattershot, because we feel that way Portland Development Commission, who's the lead for this from the City of Portland, can give direct assistance to the companies to connect them to private sector contracts. So it's been very successful, and we just recently got a U.S. Department of Commerce market development grant, which will help us to expand that again. And the part of the reason is because the city has really dedicated the expertise and has worked hand in glove with the private sector to make sure that this is a real partnership and not just an initiative that was not self-sustaining.
And you identified Japan, a combination of, you had connections there, but also post-tsunami, right? So there were specific market imperatives and opportunities, as opposed to saying we're going to go to Japan this year because we go to Japan. That's right?
Right. I mean, we've had a long relationship with Japan, so we built on our existing cultural and educational ties to sort of what Professor Latz was talking about, but then honed in on specific opportunities where we had the relationship, but then there was a specific need for new buildings post-tsunami and with some other changes in the Japanese economy. And so we were really able to work on that to open up new markets.
Okay, Mary Ellen. What hasn't gone so well?
Answer the tough questions. I talked about workforce a little bit already, but I want to reemphasize that. That is a really big issue. I'm sure it is the same issue here. I heard my colleague from the Indy Chamber reference that. And folks in the economic development world now are really in workforce development. What we also discovered is that we had, through the federal structure, the Workforce Investment Act and your WIBs, Workforce Investment Boards, really, in most cases, things that were totally outdated to what the needs of the modern market are. And thanks to the new act in Congress, all of those boards are being reconstituted with a new grant of authority and a heavier business demand side focus. So we're on top of that right now. I'm sure you are here as well. It's a great opportunity here the first part of this year to get that structure redone and get a workforce intermediary. Globalism challenges us. You're talking about just living in a global economy and having everyone think that way and think about your competitors differently, and for both exports and FDI purposes. And that gets really challenging once you get out into the outer counties of your region. And you know, be in the car for 30 minutes out of Louisville or Lexington and find yourself in a very rural place very quickly. Some of those places do have some significant foreign investment, but most of them don't. So really teaching that globalism, and in places where a lot of folks haven't been exposed to folks from other cultures yet. So we have a whole other initiative around globalization and being a welcoming city that we still have to spend a lot of time on. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about how we reorganized our economic development work and why we did. Because we realized through this work that we were not structured appropriately and we did not have our eye on the prize. A lot of people think economic development is about going out and chasing that next big project and landing it for your city. And you got to do that. You got to compete. There are always opportunities. We're going to go after those. But the big deals are black swans. And you get a black swan about once every 4 years maybe. So we go do that. We love ribbon cuttings. That's great. But you know, do not get past you the early slides of Amy's presentation about where the true economic growth and wealth creation is occurring, and that's in expansion and startups. And those things occur here at home. And that's going every day to go work with your companies, small, medium, and large, say, how can I help you grow? What do you need to grow? Is it workforce? Is it exports? And encouraging that entrepreneurial community. Because I'm sure, like you, most of the names that you know, are on the big buildings in Louisville, those big companies that are iconic to Louisville, they started in Louisville. So for me, I'm looking for where is the next Humana? Where's the next Papa John's? Where's the next Yum Brands? Because that's going to be the future of economic development.
Looking for questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. To your point, and Michael, you said we can be critical, yes? All right, good. And it's really not, but I think to the point of what Louisville is doing, the workforce development is a huge issue. And I think in this supply chain discussion, in a sense, it's the inputs at the workforce level that become an issue. And the globalization, I think, to the point that I'm interested in, because part of that is the recruitment and the retaining of not only skilled workers, but interested workers and people who want to be there. And to the mayor's point earlier about the cities being the drivers, here in Indianapolis, I think we are in a little bit of an island and face sometimes guilt by association, the other things that go on around us that sort of limits, especially a workforce of people who want to stay here or come here and innovate because of things like personal transportation infrastructure, quality of life issues, cultural and social and progressive innovation kinds of things. So how do you see that fitting into a bigger plan of how you play out to get to these bigger strides? Because to me, for us in education, that's one of the primary building blocks, especially P-12 education.
I'm wondering, actually, Michael, I'll put you on the spot. So the question was about the question was about really these other issues, these surrounding issues of environment and talent attraction and retention, and how that fits into a strategy that builds off of, you know, we start at entry point exports. Then how do you move to the next phase of the other aspects of global competitiveness, whether it's the infrastructure, connectivity, and goods movement, or, you know, clearly traded sector workforce, which is where Louisville went after the export agenda. So rather than put this panel on the spot, put you on the spot as part of the regional economic development strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it probably tees up reflections from our panel. The biggest disruptor that we have observed in the last 10 years, and I'll even say 5 years. And so when I was working for Mayor Ballard, and this is just an anecdote, more and more I would hear, do you think I'll be able to recruit people from West Coast Indianapolis or East Coast? What are the neighborhoods like? What are the communities like? What are the schools like? And that anecdote basically supports this big disruption, which is talent, so retention of talent, the ability to attract talent, and then more broadly, the quality of your workforce is the number one, at least we've learned through going through this process, and also our regional 9-county strategy. That's the number one differentiator right now between a thriving city and a declining city, and that's creating waves through everything we do. It makes our job a lot more complicated because, like Mary Ellen made the point, it's not just about deal making anymore, so we really have to double down on quality of life issues, educational attainment, things like that.
Other comments from
You
the
know,
panel?
the other half of my job is actually about placemaking. So the way we reorganized this past summer is we put all of our economic development activities, so business attraction, retention expansion, small business, together with all of our real estate planning, permitting, design, placemaking, everything from the very tactical, you got to have a permit to open, to the 25-year out vision, because those are one conversation. Every deal has two common threads, people and place. And what's funny is, so as we follow, you know, you follow us here in this Global Cities project today, we actually followed each other in the Urban Land Institute's Rose Fellowship around placemaking in cities. And so we are two cities who have clearly embraced the importance of that, because talent attraction is the same thing as company attraction. It's just a different audience.
Gil?
Well, I just add that universities are particularly well equipped to look at the array of factors that contribute to placemaking. From a historical point of view, a contemporary point of view, looking forward, our ability to attract, retain students, graduate students, enable them to make a contribution to the local community. We're all being shaped in one way or another by the forces of globalization, as I said earlier. How do we create a place that's attractive to talent? And asking that question, convening people to discuss it, that's a major commitment, I know, of my campus, and I dare say of Butler University and others as well. And that's not always found in a community, this alignment between an economic interest in competitiveness in terms of placemaking and an academic interest in really partnering with our community to create Indianapolis as one of the great cities of its size from this point forward.
So, I mean, Jeff, on this point about talent, you mentioned before that small and medium-sized businesses don't have internally, the same way that a multinational does, the ability to address some of these issues because of the lack of talent and capacity. How do you see that relating to university connections, whether it's students or faculty, and the ability for businesses that you worked with or are part of to look effectively at the international opportunities?
Well, we had the pleasure of sitting next to one another last night, and I was asked if I'd come and speak to some of the students. And there are a lot of people of the Lillies and the Cummins and the International Harvesters that were pioneers in international business that are about to retire. And I think there's no one who could better get children, students excited about what's going on than people who have done it and giving life examples. I mean, you can read the history. I was a history major. I mean, I love history, but getting someone who was there and did it and what made a difference in their life and why did they make the choices that they did, I think we need more engagement of people like me and people with that experience to get students excited.
Right. And that's part of also one of the tactics involved is the mentoring, relationship opportunities is part of the plan, right?
Absolutely, yes. Using the expertise that we have to share with others. And I would just add that, again, exporting is an economic growth opportunity. And economic growth is the win-win-win opportunity. We don't get a chance to work on things that are so upside, everybody can benefit. And so I think that is, that's a point that we want to capture. This is good for people, workers and their families. This is good for businesses. This is good for the shared investments that we make philanthropically and through government. All of that benefits through economic growth. So we can all find a pathway to the things that are deepest in our heart through this opportunity of economic growth. And we can capture it. I mean, we've identified these vast array of strengths that we have, just concentrated. Now we need to bring it out. And I think in the process of doing that, in the process of each of us getting our own international perspective on what we do, I think we start to resolve, it gets more exciting. And I think that in and of itself feeds what we need to do. And it's going to happen a little bit at a time. I'm sure we'll have some brilliant magic bullet ideas, any moment. But in the meantime, I think as we step into this, it's going to be exciting because it's all upside opportunity.
I'm looking for other questions. We have several. One there, and then there. Yes.
Hi, Sanjay Goyal. It seems like Indianapolis has all the key elements to become an exemplary global city. It seems like we have more of a communication and coordination issue. Two questions. What would be an exemplary city in that regard that does a great job of coordinating between the various leaders? And second of all, how can we use tax policy to incentivize the communication coordination and some of the goals that were outlined by Amy?
That second question is a complicated one, and actually you've got the macro level, and I'm looking around to see if any colleagues have any thoughts on this to add, but you've got the macro level about what federal tax policy might implicate in the states, and then local incentives or questions about how you support businesses or business attraction versus business expansion. The export strategies that we've seen evolving across these various metros haven't particularly addressed tax policy at the local level. It's been more about, I think, the alignment of existing resources, identification of gaps, and elimination of redundancies, the proactive targeting of business sectors to reach the companies, as Derek described, and it's happening in other communities that are here, Milwaukee and Wichita, examples as well. Proactive targeting of the businesses in that sweet spot, particularly mid-sized companies, which are identified through the market assessment that Indianapolis undertook. How do you reach those companies that aren't just naturally coming in? Being very proactive and targeted to link up with those more specific and strategic market opportunities. So I think that you'll actually see, no one has done it perfectly, because this is really an evolution of a pilot project. We started with Los Angeles, Portland, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Syracuse. Very different kinds of economies, sizes, organizational systems, level of state involvement, inland versus port cities. I think actually, some consistency has been an identification of the entry point and a dedication of staff resources to be proactive in working with companies. This could be an export concierge. It could be somebody to simply coordinate across the system, because you have a community college or a university doing something, you have a county economic development organization doing something, you've got the chamber doing something, and the allocation of effort and those resources so that you're maximizing what you already are, the funding and the staff time that you're already putting into this effort is a huge first step. So I don't know if that answers your question adequately, but there are lots of different examples. It could be a culture change, which was a part of what Louisville was able to do in creating a competitive incentive grant, right? It is structural change, it's measurements that we've seen about how you perform organizationally and how you hold each other accountable. So are you assessed favorably for just serving someone, or are you equally assessed for being able to receive someone and refer them to some other organization that you don't control? Those kinds of issues are all dealt with in these plans as they've evolved. So you see a lot of the core elements outlined in the tactics what Indianapolis put forward. I keep coming back to, it's got to be on the implementation side, right? So you have some very specific things that you're already lined up to do right away, and the question is, what's the engagement of really the business community, the individual businesses, the commitment from people like Jeff and others to support this effort and maintain the kind of collaboration across sectors and across political jurisdictions to execute. I'm going to stop talking, but we have other people who are in the room.
Comment on that.
Would you please?
I think Indiana Economic Development has done a tremendous job with edge credits and other tools to help small businesses. My family has a small manufacturing business that definitely benefited from the IDC programs, whether it was the funds to transform a 50,000 square foot building that had been vacant for 15 years, or whether it was getting training funds. I think, and then we have the universities, whether it was AU or Purdue or different incubators that there are around the state helping small and mid-sized businesses get started. I think if you just shifted the focus of some of those programs to include the international sector, And as Kathy and I talked, I've been playing with an idea of an international business incubator and bringing in entrepreneurs from these other places around the world to come here, because the strengths of advanced manufacturing and distribution and all the things that are core to Indiana and Indianapolis are huge. And quite frankly, a lot of the international folks, especially in Asia, while most of them are concentrated on the coasts intimidate them. They'd much rather be in the Midwest. They'd much rather have the kind of culture that we have, and the family focus and the clean air and
water.
And water, right, and water. So we have a lot of advantages that I think have been identified over the last 10 and 15 or more years. I just think we need to kind of expand the focus or shift the focus a little bit to focus on the export and the foreign direct investment. I mean, what a lot of entrepreneurs in the Midwest don't know, just like the U.S. bought European countries when we became, European companies when we became a powerhouse, and just as Japan in the 80s bought U.S. companies, the Chinese are going to come and buy a lot of U.S. companies over the next 20 and 30 years. Mm-hmm. And they're not doing it to shut it down. They're doing it for the brands. They're doing it for the workforce. They're doing it because they're more nervous about coming here than we are of going there, and they'd like people who are experts on what go on. And I think that the city and the state can facilitate those kinds of arrangements. I think one of my frustrations is there may be 20 experts who do what I do. I don't know 10 of them. Mm-hmm. I should know 10 of them. I should know all 20 of them, but I don't. And we're all so busy in our silos that we don't share. And if that could be marshaled to all come together, I think the power is huge.
Yeah, and that's actually, that's the entry point we've seen for that kind of collaboration and the integration, not just on the public intermediaries or the private, but also how do you integrate the lawyers and the accountants and all the ecosystem that's available to think globally, and in particular the entry point being exports. And I think the point that you made is exactly right. For what we've seen in Louisville and other communities been working with, and what we're hearing from Indianapolis about, it's not just exports is the entry point, but then you move to the traded sectors, right? You start talking about those advanced industries and others that it's not locally serving, but what's going to gin up the multiplier effect that Amy included in her slides. And so those kinds of, if you take it from exports as on the terms of tax policy and other policies to that higher level of you're dealing with traded sectors and exports being a piece of that, it's exactly, that is very consistent we're seeing across. I had 2 questions, and they were up hands, so I'll take them both at the same time if they still have them, and then maybe we can have a consolidated group of answers. Yes?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Charles Bantz from IUPUI, and there's so many good suggestions here. I want to throw in one to pick up a thread you had earlier, and that's relationships. Because one of the truly striking things about the international work that I've done is how many of them involve somebody who had touched our community at some point in the past. And you're nodding your head. I thought that you would. And one of the questions is how we treat people when they come at 18 years of age and show up on our campus, or 25 and show up, or in our community. But also, how do we keep track of this? And I'm curious if anyone in any of these has actually thought about, we in Indianapolis know each other, we do that, and I find out that one of our former faculty is in charge of China's foreign currency, all right? So he has more money, forgive me, than Chase. The People's Bank of China has a few $1 trillion of our money, but I only found that out because a chair of a department said, you ought to think about him for an honorary degree. Well, we have, as it turns out, and Gil knows this, lots of those. I suspect each of you do in this room. How do we capture that in the best possible way, like a family album, and build that as a long-term? Because the cultures that I'm thinking of are people who don't do business the first time. Maple Leafs didn't sign, I suspect, their first trip to China. And a set of relationships be built, and that's more like a family than it is like a transaction, to use the term you're using. So just a thought to add to these amazingly good suggestions today.
Thank you. And was there one more? There's one over there too. So I'll take both, and then we will absolutely So relationship building, integration, how do you maintain that? There was a question over here.
My prejudice will be overwhelming in this, but which is to say I'm not a fan of these private colleges, especially technical. Your comment that Louisville has a technical college, I assume that's a public institution. I don't know. We, of course, have Purdue here combined with IU, but we don't otherwise have a standalone technical training that I can think of. I may be missing it. Anyhow, what did stand out to me in some of your statistics is how we are in this community particularly lacking in the training for the people who need to fill the jobs that we also are unable to create. So it comes down to who's going to do that, and obviously IUPUI is ready, willing, and able, as is Butler. I'm wondering, my perception from the private colleges is that it creates a lot of debt and very few graduates, and I mean, half of them are under indictment and whatever. But I am wondering, in other communities that may have the shortage of infrastructure in education, though I don't think we really do, if these private colleges are playing a role.
Okay, and one more, and then we'll take that take it to the panel for concluding remarks. Yes?
Thank you. I'm Dr. Toby Malachi, founder and global chief executive of Malachi Group Worldwide. And I'm looking at your faces, and I see many of you don't even know what an SME is, do you? I kind of thought that a little bit. And just briefly, and I had the honor to serve on this great panel for a short while with the great work the Chamber's done, Mike and Brian and Kathy and under Al's leadership and Ashley. But an SME typically originated in Europe and throughout Asia and the Middle East. An SME is really what we call a small business from maybe 1 to 500 employees, one maybe $500,000 or $500 million, 500,000 in revenue. So the terminology is a little bit better. Also around the world, you'll see that an SME is a lot more reverend than an American corporation will be. And I'm a former General Motors executive, and I was thinking about your term right there. When I left General Motors Corporation, I was up here. I was over all Chicagoland for Chevrolet Motor Division. When I started my business 34 years ago, I said, oh, this is going to be easy to run the business. I'll come down here because I'm used to dialing 10 numbers to get whatever I wanted to do. And I got knocked down pretty quickly in the reality of the world. It's the same way with going from trade now to, from domestic business to international trade. And you asked a very succinct question about that, because it's a mindset, what Professor Gill, Dr. Gill said, is that there's a mindset involved here to make that transition and then be, to talk to an SME and not at an SME. So there's going to be a transformation made there. My question is that you asked yesterday, Merrick, on the Global Steering Committee, what succinctly came out of the global the export plan that we had and how you can use that. And I thought about that, and under Kathy Davis's direction, there was one question that really permeated in my mind. If the only tool you have in your hand, in your toolbox, is a hammer, then everything's going to look like a nail. And the one thing that came out the most to me, and I said that they listened, and Amy, they listened. They listened to the SMEs, that they really did, is that the assessment, when Michael spoke about the assessment instrument, it's going to go online, that is so key for an SME. That is the one thing, if nothing else happens, the assessment is going to be able to help him or her ascertain, number one, is exporting for him or her. It's a daunting task. It's not as easy as one thinks it is. And so that's the one thing to come out. It's the one thing I would talk about. And you're exactly right, Jeffrey. I went on 2 trade missions, and we got an excellent Secretary of Commerce here in state of Indiana, Victor Smith. He's excellent, as is our governor and our great mayor who has saved a lot of putting our bodies through a lot of travel. He's brought Indianapolis on the global scene. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that. But the one thing, we went on 2 trade missions with the Secretary of Commerce in Washington, D.C. You're exactly right. As soon as he showed up, I'm the Secretary of Commerce, he had all the people around him, And it was all SMEs. They walked right around him, right, came right over to us. Yet, and that point should not be overlooked. In terms of Mary Ellen, you said black swan. I'm going to change my words now, since I'm Italian.
I'm German.
If I could only blush. But we chase the big deals, like you said, and SMEs will do that, and that's a danger now having exporting instruments right now. That's going to be a danger SMEs looking for that. So you're all very correct in your approach and what you're doing. And I just wanted to thank you that this is an SME. We're an SME. And so the mindset's going to be different. Don't get discouraged. Don't get your feelings hurt. We're maybe egocentric, but we don't get paid every week or every 2 weeks. We might not get paid for a whole month. It might be 2 months. So as you make that approach and you ask that question, I want to thank you for that. But that's one thing that I think it'd be huge. Nothing else comes out of here.
Great, thank you. So really quick, because we're going to run out of time, the question about how do you maintain organizing, relationship building, touching on that, training, and I'll just say that there are a wide range of educational institutions ranging from private colleges and universities, private technical training organizations, to public universities. It is it depends on the place. And they have been involved in various ways across the country, and it's all tailored to your local circumstances, your local assets. And then this final point about midsize. So does anyone want to touch on the relationship building, anything else on the university side quickly, or then the midsize business emphasis?
Well, I know the younger folks on our team have talked a lot about social network mapping, which I think is intended to answer the chancellor's question. So we'll all be learning more about that. One thing about this process is we learned a lot more than we can address in this plan, but that's all still there. So this plan is a start, and there are going to be lots of additional opportunities. And I would certainly add Ivy Tech into the capacity for creating the training. And I think some of it is visibility. How do we give people the visibility of their future opportunity? I think the more we're mapping and projecting our economic opportunity, the better we get at that, and the better we can match the skills that we're developing to the jobs that are going to be available and high paying in the future.
I was going to say the very same thing. Rather than repeat the social networking point, I would add that we need to be doing more storytelling. We need to talk about our successes, our failures. We need to follow our graduates. We need to have more information from the collective community about the entrepreneurs and the trailblazers who have gone out and what they've have to share with us upon returning to our community. And I think if we can collect that information and present it in a way that is constructive, and we can go much further, much faster.
I'll add one other comment that kind of takes in a lot of what we've heard here. It's one of the things that concerns me the most as an economic developer and a city official is income inequality and the widening gap in our economy between the haves and the have-nots, the disproportion there. And so, that's not me, coming up here being, on a social agenda. That's an economic agenda. That's a big problem for our economies. It's a bigger problem in the South, and I know it bleeds up here a little bit too. We're a little bit Midwest, a little bit South, but we've got a lot of the Southern economic problems. SMEs, exports, all the things we're talking about today are opportunities where people can get a family supporting wage and have a great career and maybe not have to have a college degree. A lot of these areas, particularly manufacturing, some of these other advanced industries, are pathways to prosperity. So what we focus on every day is raising that median annual wage for folks, and closing that gap in income inequality. And all of the tools we've talked about today are pathways towards that success.
Thank you very much. So just in conclusion, I want to express appreciation to the panel. And I just want to also reemphasize with Kathy's point before we got into a number of questions, that this is, and we've seen this, and so we can say this with authority, that the export effort is the entry point for non-competitive regional collaboration on something that everybody benefits from. You're not concerned about whether it's in the city of Indianapolis or one of the external or the surrounding counties. You can all organize. We've seen it in Louisville. We've seen it in Wichita. We've seen it in Portland. We've seen it across the board, the export entry point for both thinking about economic development differently, which was not something we actually expected to come out of this initiative when we started it, and the organizing around a regional effort that includes both public and private sector and the civic organizations as well, is something very tangible. And so we're with you in the Global Cities Initiative, and we thank you for your commitment being here today and your commitment going forward to helping the Chamber and its partners deliver what's being promised in this export strategy. So thank you all very much.
Thanks, Mayor.